Another video, and in this video I'll be talking about promise.any. So what is promise.any? Promise.any is a method which takes an array of promises and it returns a single promise which resolves as soon as any of the promise resolves or rejects when all the promises are rejected. Okay, so let's try to see a working example of it. So what I'll do, I'll create two promises. Let's call it P1, and it will take two pair callbacks called resolve and reject, and then we will be resolving it after 100 millisecond with P1 as a data. Now let's copy it, create another promise, and we will call it P2. And now if I use promise.any, which will take an array of promises, which is P1 and P2 in our case, and if I do .then console log, and if I run this code, we should be seeing P1 because P1 is the first promise to resolve, and that's why we'll see this data over here. Now let's change the timing to 1100 milliseconds, and if I run this code now, I'll be seeing P2 because now P2 is the first one to resolve. Now let's reject the first promise, and if I reject the first promise and run, I should still see P2 because promise.any resolves as soon as any of the promise resolves. It does not care if any of the promise fails. But if both the promises are rejected, in that case it will throw an aggregate error. So let's try to run that. So what I'll be doing is I'll be doing a console error with error.message, and now if I run the code, you'll see all the promises were rejected. So that's how promise.any works. Now our goal is to implement our own version of promise.any. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and create a new function. I'll name it my promise.any, and then we will replace promise.any with my promise.any, and then it should work as it was working before. Alright, now we know promise.any takes an array of promises, so we'll be also taking an argument which will be array of promises. So let's call it promise array. Alright, now we know promise.any returns a new promise, so we'll be returning a promise from here. We'll be calling it. Alright, now we are returning a new promise. Now what we need to do is we need to loop over this promise array. So we'll be calling for each, and this will give me this individual promise and its index. And now if we check for the individual promise, if this promise is resolved, what do we do? So if any of the promise resolves, we need to straight away resolve the promise, right? And if this promise fails, then what we need to do? We cannot reject it now because this should be rejected only when all the promises are rejected, right? So we should be storing this error somewhere. So let's store it. Let's create a variable called errors, which should be an error array, and then we'll be storing it in that array. So let's store at the current index, and let's store it over here. Now when do we reject this one? We reject when we know all the promises are rejected. So we'll be checking for the index, and if it is equal to length -1, then we know that we have gone over all the promises, and if all of them are rejected, then we can reject this promise. So we'll be calling reject. So promise.any returns different kind of error, and it's called aggregate error. So we'll be also throwing aggregate error. Let's just copy this, and I'll be pasting over here, and we'll be passing the array of errors, and then it takes another argument where we can pass a message. So I'll be passing the same message what we had here, and I think that's all. This should work. Let's test it. So we'll revert this code to resolve. Now both the promise should resolve, and if I run the code, I should be seeing P1. So I can see P1. Now I'll change the timing to 1100 millisecond, and now I should see P2. I am seeing P2. Now I'll reject the first promise, and still I should be seeing P2, because promise.any cares only for resolves if any of the promises also. I'm still seeing P2, which is good. Now I'll reject the second promise as well, and in this case in this case we should be getting a aggregate error. So let's run it. Yeah, and we can see all the promises were rejected, because both the promises were rejected here. So yeah, that's all for this video. If you like the video, do let me in comment section, and if you want me to make video on any other topic, please do let me in the comment section. That's all for this video. Thank you. Have a good day.